Welcome, everyone. Great stories come out of odd moments. So I hope everybody gets that as a takeaway. And sometimes the funniest or the moments that happen, they end up being funny and they help in the future. So excuse me, happy Friday and welcome everybody again. And some people it might be for Saturday already, but this is storytelling data for influence. It's not a session to teach you to be a writer. If anybody came in to learn copywriting, it's a session to help you understand that your data matters and has value. But if you can't translate it well for your audience, no one will move on that data. And basically, that's what you want. You want movement, you want action. All right. And then, of course, we have Product Camp Online. All of our sponsors, please go visit, have all that good stuff. And to kick off, most people ask, how did I get here? So in a silly way, and humor is a good way to kick things off too, when there's a little bit of chaos. I tell people that my mother was an accountant, or she is an accountant, and my father loved sci-fi. So somehow they made a person that takes data and looks at it in a fantastical way and story tells to bridge the gap between kind of the left brain and the right brain. These are just some logos of companies that I've done projects with, that my company has worked with, just to show a little bit of why I have some influence on the subject. So let's kick off. Storytelling. Storytelling is your power to be heard. It's a secret weapon, and everybody tells stories. It's not that hard to do. When you wake up in the morning and you have your coffee cup, what's on your coffee cup? Or how did you go about your day? Think about your internal story, but then you also need to think about your audience. The key theme to take away here is your audience, because you're looking to influence someone else. You know what you want. You need them to take agreement and go on the actions that you're putting out there. So storytelling, of course, is the bridge of that communication gap. It really helps simplify very complex and hard to understand things. It's like engineering and abstract. And once you can tie emotion, which comes through story, it will actually wire the brain to remember the story and be able to share it. And of course, once you have that patterned feeling that you have guided to be that feeling, you start building trust. Well, first you need connection. That's your story. Then it builds trust. And with that trust, you can start with influence. This doesn't mean that a story will immediately get you from A to Z, because influence takes some, influence and trust is something earned. So the connection gets you in the door to start building that trust. So something we need to be sure about, and I just want to make sure everybody can still see, correct? Okay. So let's talk about the embracement gap. All right. Data has been proven to be integral. 2 years ago, Experian did research that said over 80% of companies recognize that data has to be part of the strategy. And we know in 2020 that that has just been accelerated. So why is there this trust and embracement gap? You were asked to do a job. Assuming you were asked to do a job, you deliver your data, and yet nobody moves, nobody understands it, it just sits there. And your efforts, where did they go? So data is wanted, but is it valued? And the value comes from the audience of when you hand it over. There are risks to whoever takes the data and saying yes, because they're hoping it works, and then saying no, because maybe they've lost an opportunity, but yet they've saved things that happen. There's data integrity skepticism that affects on a global scale. There is a Gartner research study that shows over a quarter of everyone's data is faulty. And then there's other studies that says most people believe 70% of their data is faulty. IBM did a study that showed from participants, there's billion-dollar losses a year because of bad and faulty data. So this is something we need to look in the mirror for ourselves. When we deliver these items, you know, we're just handing them over and expecting someone to believe us. Well, the brain is wired for reward and pain, and it's a 5-to-1 split. Reward, for every one reward, your brain is scanning for 5 looks of pain. It's survival wiring. So you've kind of got a hill to climb to get the trust that you're looking for that can give you the influence. Our brains also seek pattern and predictability. And of course, that is data, but you've got to fill in those story gaps. Okay, audience. Key is the audience. We have to humanize the who. There is no influence without an audience. Everything is great, then hand it over, but if nobody does anything with it, again, what have you done? So when you start thinking about your audience, and we live in a me world, which boundaries are great. It's great to talk about yourself, but your audience, what is their end goal? This picture over to the bottom right has been on Facebook for a while. I find it fascinating. It makes me giggle. Somebody designed this. They thought, all right, we have an audience. We're going to build them a nice path. But yet you see to the right off the decorative path, everybody cuts through the grass down to the dirt. So when somebody provided this data, who was their audience? Was it park management, or was it the people actually using the park? And those are some things we need to pay attention to in confirmation bias. And also it's something to be aware of in silos. We're experts in what we do, and we tend to stay in our lanes, but storytelling is world building. It's better to step across those lanes and see what everybody else is up to and doing. And that's how you can connect with them, because they want to be heard as well, just like you. Chris Voss with Never Split the Difference actually says even the bank robber wants to be heard. Empathy. There's a lot of talk about empathy, to be in their shoes. This is where, again, unconscious bias and silos can be an issue. Many times we think we're empathizing because we're like, oh, they do it like this, I would do it like this. But it's not so simple. We have a natural tendency to empathize with people because we don't want to see pain. But then sometimes we're working with teams or an individual that it is really hard to try to empathize with. They perhaps have an aggressive nature, or they're just completely disengaged. That's where you can step into tactical empathy. Try to break through that resistance to at least be heard, because again, you need your audience. And also notice chains of influence. There's personal, business, environment. Those all make a difference in how things move. So let's go with a case study about chains of influence. This was a product actually that a client had, that they had talked to people in the field, they had received data, they'd talked to governments. It was based out of California. They built this product, they loved it, it was amazing, it was researched, one sold, one period. It ended up being shelved in a warehouse and sat collecting dust for 2 years until I was tasked to see, is there something we can do with this? Because it was too hard for them to just let it go. So why did one person get it and they absolutely loved it? This is where you can use a little bit of investigation journalism, like step into that role. And so I asked the end user, what do you love about this product? And he loved that it helped him stay safe, speed up his day, all of these things. All right, so how do you get this product? Well, I have to ask my manager. All right, that's his chain of influence. So you start going up, go to the manager. How do you like this product? Love it. How did you get to the point of choosing to spend money on this? Well, I had to sell it up. So it's all the point of selling up, that it goes to the CFO. The CFO is not out on the street using the product. He's in an office in a different location, and all he knows is he is a chain of influence that has to go to governmental money to make a purchase order. So what we did is we built different stories and communications to talk to every single audience. We relaunched the product. We didn't change a single thing. We just dusted it off. We sold out in one event and got purchase orders across the country for heavy equipment, which is pretty impressive because the Rockies in the United States stops a lot of that logistic. But that's just how well when you speak to the right audience. Am I going too fast? Is everybody good? I don't know if they're speaking in the chat. I know I'm kind of speeding up because of the late start. All right, then we go into the audience of what do they want? And it seems like it would be easy. They said what they want, you went and provided the solution. But really, is it what they want in that moment? Data overwhelm is real. You see data versus value. When you hand off data and you don't explain what the purpose of it does and tell them how it will build their story and provide them value, they get stuck. So when you hand things over, it is data and value. You still have that extra step. When things are unclear, everything stops. There is analysis paralysis. There is fear of loss, fear of risk. Your audience has these internal stories, and what you're doing is you're filling in these gaps. The brain gets a dopamine hit, filling in story gaps, whether they're incorrect or correct. So what you want to do is guide them to the correct way that your data can provide. And a case study with this one, just a really short one, there was a client that I worked with that their agency partner handed off data and the client didn't move. And they said, you know, what's going on? So I asked the manager, what's going on? And his response was over here, them circling, does it have any value? This was an agency that provided graphs, an entire pretty presentation of this is your obvious next step, and yet it was too much. And this person who already had a trust and connection and influence with this agency still sat there and said, I don't know if it has value. We were able to change a bit of how the data was put together and presented because he also had people he had to report to. We got him to say yes, that he did trust the value. We launched that program within 2 weeks. It beat the number 2 programs in the previous 10 years within 2 weeks. It was amazing. It was over a 400% bump in 2 weeks. But yet he could have missed that opportunity because he didn't understand if it had value. So clarity is kind, unclear is unkind is what Brene Brown says. And that's something to kind of hold in our head. Here's another case study I call movie versus math. We were tasked to help 2 senior stakeholders convince the top stakeholder to sign off on an enterprise overhaul using digital. And they had been trying for 2 years, getting nowhere. All right, so they asked me to come in, can you help us put something together? So I used symbolism. I used a movie that was very well understood, that had urgency, risk of not moving, let's keep going, promoting all of the action. I workshopped this with the 2 senior stakeholders so we could get it ready to present. But then I keep saying confirmation bias and silos because it is so easy. It's how we move that we don't realize what we're doing, that I stopped. I knocked on that senior stakeholder's door and I said, hey, what do you like better, movies or math? He said, math. A part of me was a little hurt because I put together something I thought was pretty awesome. And I had to go back. I had to change my slides, change the language, present it, because his brain wanted to receive a very data-driven story versus a very creative story. And every audience member is going to choose a different thing. And whenever we change that, this gentleman was so resistant because of 2 years of saying no. He gave me 30 minutes on a Friday, which we know everybody taps out on a Thursday about noon, especially in nowadays. But so we presented. He ended up staying for an hour and a half because he could understand. He was engaged. We were speaking his language, and he signed off on an entire enterprise overhaul in that meeting. Here is where and when on their terms. I don't know if everyone had noticed when we talk about audience, it is who, what, when, where. Kind of like if you're doing an invite. Who's your audience? Where do they go? Or what is it? Where, when is it, and where? Just think of it like a calendar invite. So when and where on their terms. You're still building connection. You need to gain trust. And of course, you need to gain influence. Meet them where they are. That can be everything from a location to if you talk to them on the phone and their kitten knocks over all of their notes by jumping in the office, you know, just meet them where they are and realize, you know, that it is about giving them a sense of safety to be able to be real. Brain under stress loses about 15 IQ points. So you want to help your audience member relax and be able to engage and to understand you. So positive stories, of course, questions, goals, look for their habits and patterns when you meet them on their term, be persistent, Don't be a bully, but be persistent. And of course, use metaphors that they understand. Car metaphors, fishing metaphors, there's pizza metaphors. There are so many, but it's whatever works for you, your industry, your culture. It needs to be a common language. And you want to guide the framework of their brain to go, I get it. Now I think I'm going to listen. And then that's where you can start in on your influence. So I mentioned fishing. So let's look at the picture on the right first. And this is a world record holder of a fish called a paddlefish. Why that matters. Many of my projects are working with companies in crisis. I was actually at a company in bankruptcy that was looking for acquisition. So a lot of people were running around in states of basically fight, flight, and freeze. Am I going to lose my home? Is everything going to shut down? How am I going to feed, my family? And those are very real emotions that can cloud out the best data. So I'm there to help, but yet I could not get an audience with this gentleman. For 2 days, he fully, completely avoided me. So I noticed his pattern. I noticed the plant layout, and I decided to sit in his walk path between him leaving the plant and going to the restroom. And I sat there and I waited, and I was positive and cheerful, and I spoke to the receptionist, and I said, hey, can you tell me what is this guy like? And he was a key senior engineer, and he had the board basically told him his product he needed to fix was going to save the company. So he was under a lot of pressure and just didn't want to deal with an outsider. So the receptionist said, well, he likes to fish. Okay, for me, that's a connection point. If it's not a connection point for you, you could have kept asking, well, tell me a little bit more. But for me, it's a connection point. So every time he left the plant to walk over to the restroom, I literally said, hey, I heard you like to fish, and I heard that you do this and this. And, I got about 10 seconds on a 20-foot walk path. But when he came back, I stuck with it. Yeah, my dad and I used to go on annual fishing trips down in, and I wait. I wasn't pushy, but I stayed persistent. So a few hours later, he comes back. Hi, so I just want to finish in, well, I didn't say just want to finish, but hi, so this fish, it's really hard to blah, blah. And when he came back through, the receptionist also said he was so into fishing. It was definitely something he loved, and that he had won boats. So I'm really trying to connect this. 4 times we did this for me to get out basically 3 sentences. On the 3rd or the 4th time, he stopped. Didn't even look me in the face, but just dropped his head back, which that's data. That's data of his environment, of just his exhaustion, his mental exhaustion, and how he just wants to get things done. And he doesn't believe there's any kind of trust with me yet. So he drops his head and says, fine. Do you want to see what goes on in the plant? That was a test. Will you come with me to where I feel comfortable? Instead of, an office where he would normally assume a corporate person to be. And I said, yeah, let's do it. We meet, he shows me the product, we explain it. I'm getting calls now from this guy on everything. He is re-energized because he has been seen, he's been heard. I have the VP of sales calling me saying, why is our top engineer calling you and telling you about new product improvements instead of actually calling me? It's building that relationship. The reason I add pizza and cookies, I have been able to use food, and food evokes emotion and usually brings back very positive emotions. So that's why pizza and cookies, to open more doors than I can count. When you're thinking of, I need 20 minutes or I need 3 hours, think in micro increments. If you are meeting them on the way to the restroom or to coffee, or if it's just by a phone call, can I get 15 minutes? And cookies will usually sway in about 15 minutes. And then you're building that connection. And next thing you know, you're getting 2-hour meetings on schedules that people were taking a year that they could never do. They got to like you, and that's building through connection. I threw in pets because you want to find something that's easy to talk about. That will be different for everyone, but pets tend to be a very easy subject. Kids, that is on a per basis thing. Something like the weather is too ambiguous. This is about information receptability, of course. Your audience, they're thinking of a lot. So what's the simplest way? You want to quantify your solution, but you don't want to deliver the math. You want to show them the solution. Keep it simple. KISS, of course, stands for keep it simple, stupid. I've also heard keep it simple, silly. It doesn't matter. It's not meant to be a bully term. It's just to remind ourselves to be clear. There's a lot of fancy graphs like the previous case study that I mentioned that don't go anywhere because even though it looked pretty, it didn't convey a story. Images can convey, 1,000. There's the old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But just the picture doesn't tell the whole story. And you want to guide the story that fills that in. Empathy, of course, how would you have felt if everybody was depending on you to save a business of millions and millions of dollars? It's a lot. So you want to, again, meet them where they are, things of that nature, and present the next solution. Again, what seems obvious to you might be missing for somebody else. So offer them a bit of partnership or that you're available. Leave them a list of terms. Don't tell them, come ask me, because that is forcing them to take an action. You want to provide them enough things that if they can step back later and look at it, they don't need your help until they want it. So summary, storytelling bridges that understanding gap. It allows the delivery of information and education. You need that connection, that trust to build your influence. And your influence is what's going to get agreement, whether it's a sign off on a product, whether it's a somebody just take my call, whether it's a let's go launch, or how are we going to build this algorithm? Ask questions, get into that investigator mode. Insights are everywhere. It's not just in the math. It's in, was it raining when I drove into work? Because that's going to change maybe a bit of my receptivity if somebody cut me off in traffic and I almost get in a car wreck. It's how you would react. Think about that. How would you react in that situation? And, be aware that sometimes when you are ready to present something, you need to change in that moment. So be aware of picking up all those things, how the head tilts, the way they move, body language. And of course, if you don't see them, there's tone and inflection in words. Email is a tougher thing. You don't want to use all caps. That sounds very aggressive, but bullets. And some people don't like bullets, and some people like everything, and some people like small. Ask your audience, what is the best way of communication? How can I make working with me easier for you? You want to help them feel comfortable so that they can take that step and work with you. And that is it. I got it all in, and I hope there's time for questions. So my apologies, it was fast. But Laura, did anybody put any questions in the chat or in the box? Do we still have time?
Yes, we do. We have about 8 minutes, but I have not seen any questions come up. So if you guys have questions for Rachel, post them here. Or Rachel, if you're okay with it, we could put your hand up and we could unmute you.
Yeah.
While we're waiting and see if anybody posts any questions, do you have any suggestions for resources that our participants could use to find out more information on this topic?
Storytelling information and resources. Yes, there's a book I recommend for everyone. It's actually a negotiation book, but it is all about influencing, getting your voice heard by the other during times of crisis. That's Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Also, Atomic Habits is a great book because you recognize how people start doing what they do. And then once you can understand the pattern recognition, it's easier to step in and speak with them. I'm Dare to Lead, Train. That's Brene Brown. It's The Art of Courageous Communications. When people are nervous and they stop, it's usually because it's a fear assessment in the brain. Remember that 5-to-1 mountain you have to climb from fear and reward. And things like grief and loss and shame, if something doesn't work out, that tends to follow the industries and the people I work with, just because of the situations they are. But it's, everybody wants to go home on a Friday and just, hang out, take a nap, do whatever. They want to be seen, heard, treated well, respected, valued. And to go back to the me thing, I'm not saying to ever put yourself into a, I don't like the word abuse, but when you're trying to talk with someone and they are not receptive and being aggressive about it, step back. bring in an advocate, ask for somebody else to see how you can work with that person. Because even though you're trying to influence, you shouldn't put yourself in a situation that you're going to be taken advantage of, or be injured emotionally, or whatever. And I know 2020 was tough on a lot of people, and it's just deep breaths. I call it slow and low. Chris Voss calls it the late night FM DJ voice. I spoke fast on this, but lower your tone and speak slower so that people can understand. And then ask questions. Keep asking questions. Many people stop at the first or the second question, and you're going to get the meat a little bit farther and start practicing just on a day-to-day basis. It'll become very natural from when you go into a store to buy something to when you do need something to happen. Storytelling will just become a natural process of how things move and how things influence. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. And we did have a question come in. And also, before I get to the question, someone asked if you could post the book names. Do you think you could do that over in the Slack channel related to this topic after this?
Yes, I will. I'll write that down. And I don't, I love behavioral, the behavior and the data. So there's a lot of neuroscience down that level. I'm going to avoid those books because they tend to be so scientific heavy. So I'll go with the basic business books.
Okay. And then the one question came from Courtney asking if you have connecting or storytelling tips for clients that are different culturally from you.
Yeah, good question, Courtney. Yes, I've worked global and mostly virtual since 2004. And what you need to find, what I found the most is, because sometimes there's a language barrier of speed, of being able to understand. And of course, your references are going to be different. Your metaphors are going to be different. So for example, I worked with a team over in Asia, and they were having problems with another team over in another country. And they were having such a disconnect because the one culture was very go, go, go. And this other culture was very, let us take a breath, let us step back and wait. And because of the pressure, they just started throwing out answers. Even though they weren't the correct answers, they were wanting to make the other team feel better, feel heard, feel comfortable. And of course, that wasn't really helping. It was just giving out incorrect information, a lot of back and forth. So I asked for a leader on the Asia team that was the closest to English. So this is a little trick using IM if it's a virtual or whatever you need, or text on your phone. And I said, when you need time, shoot me a note. I'll step in the middle. So when the aggressive team said, I want an answer now, and I would get a text saying, wait, we need to discuss it, I would step in and say, can you expand on exactly, this is going back to clarify, can you expand exactly why you need that question, or how that would actually help move the end product or change this area of the goal? And what I was doing is I was allowing the other culture the breathing room so that they could be in the right frame of mind to provide a correct answer. And so it's just being kind of that go between and use what you have. So we used just I am whenever he said, hey, I need time. Does that help?
Thank you, Rachel.
Sure.
I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Are you going to join some of our participants if they'd like to over in Wonder Me after this event?
Yes, I will be there. I will be there. So I would love to talk to people and hear their own stories.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. There are 2 minutes left. If you have anything else you'd like to cover, or if you want to head over there, you can do that now.
Let's go ahead and give everybody their own breathing room. I know these sessions are pretty on top of each other. So let's go ahead and end it. And thank you everyone for coming. And I hope this helps make your conversations easier.